Ronnie, can you just start off by telling me who you are?
Yes, I came to Hereford, Ron Radford, and came to Hereford from Newport County. That were in 1971, and I started there under John Charles. John Charles was the manager at the time, Frank Miles the chairman, and Hereford were a really well-known non-league team, and they were a team that and they had the crowd, and if you played in the Southern League, Hereford was one of the games that you would look forward to because of the atmosphere, and they always had good players, and yeah, so it was, although I came out of league football into back into part-time football. Mainly it was because that I couldn't afford to stay full-time. I'd gave up my joiner shop, and we just couldn't survive on the wages that we were getting. So, and I was quite relieved to get back to to part-time, being full-time, because I was travelling every day to Newport and coming back, and it was pretty tiring. So, and then in the close season, Hereford came along, and John Charles came with Mike McLaughlin, who was the captain, who I played for Newport. And he said, I understand that you're going part-time, and you know, you're able to, you know, look for other clubs. And I said, yeah, at the moment I'm just waiting now and seeing who comes along. He says, well, that's why we're here today. Frank Miles, the chairman, have said, you know, like it would be great if we could get Ronnie to come and play here, and that's how it came about that I started at Hereford. And you know, little did I know then what were going to be in store for us in the years that I was there. I was born in a little mining village, South Emsall. It's near Pontefract in West Yorkshire, and it was probably one of the best times of my life, because in those days, you know, we had to make our own you know, fun, and everybody knew each other, and yeah, and my local football team was Frickley Colliery. And I used to, as a young boy, go and watch their games every Saturday, and I was there, stood there after the match with my autograph book, and you know, I had dreams then of, my dream was to play on the actual pitch at Frickley Colliery, because I love football and any sport from an early age, and really, you know, I couldn't have had it any better really, because all my friends, you know, they were all in the same mode, and yeah, it was a great childhood. And as we got older, I remember on a Sunday morning, I was about 9 years old, and living in an estate. They used to have a football field that were right in the middle of the estate. And on a Sunday morning, all the local lads, 18, 19-year-olds, used to turn up on a cold morning or a hot morning in the summer, and anybody who come got a game. And I was always the last one to be picked because I was the smallest. There were 9-year-old playing, and little did I know that really that was the start of my football career, because it were a great start in as much as I were playing with older people. I were playing with people who were playing football every week, and so I were used to playing you know, with older ones, so it wasn't a problem for me as I got older to adapt, and they were priceless days then. Well, yeah. Yeah.
So tell us, who was the first, how did you start out on your career of being?
Yeah, my career, I was captain of our school football team, and we played a final at Frickley Colliery. That was my first dream come true. And then I started to play for a youth club that we went to. Annie and I went to the same youth club. That's where we met. And it was during that time that there was another a football team in a higher league, a men's league. It was the Yorkshire League, what they used to call it. And I played for South Kirby Colliery. I'd only played about 5 or 6 games, and one day the manager came and he said, oh, he says, there's a scout been watching you for a while. He said, do you want to have a word with him? And I said, well, yeah, fantastic. So I spoke to the guy, and he was a Sheffield Wednesday scout, and he said, how do you feel about, you know, going for a trial at Sheffield Wednesday? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, that'll be fine. And funny enough, there were 2 of our lads who played in the same team. One of them actually got the same thing. He got offered, he was a little bit older than me, so he was playing in the A team at Sheffield, now we're playing with the junior team, which is equivalent to today's youth team up to 18s. And I went for a trial. I was an apprentice joiner by trade. I worked at Doncaster Plant Works, and still had these dreams of being a footballer. Anyway, I went for this trial, and they said, yeah, we'd like you to sign amateur forms, and that's when my other dreams started to come true, because we as a junior team played on another pitch like they do today, and we used to play our games on a morning, Saturday morning, and in the afternoon, if the first team were playing at home, they invited us to go and watch the game and I kept thinking, you know, I wonder if I'll ever play on big pitch like. Anyway, I did well that year, and I was ever present. I was playing with all the ground staff professional guys. I think there were only 2 or 3 amateurs in the team, and I got retained for the following season, and that's where then all the amazing things started to come to fruit. We got, you know, in the Youth Cup, we got to the quarterfinals of the Youth Cup, and we played Everton. And I remember the first game at Hillsborough. It was a night game, it was a floodlight game, and we went out onto the pitch, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic, it's like daylight, you know. Anyway, we were warming up and kicked, you know, practicing, you know, before the start of the game, and 5 minutes before the game started, they put the other 2 lights on, and it was just an amazing feeling, and it opened the ground up everywhere, and then you're looking at the stands and you're looking, and it's just a quite unbelievable experience, you know. And that was the first time I'd ever played in such a situation, really, and could never have dreamed of that, but I did, and it was a dream come true. Being a lad from South Hemsel, never imagined that I would be doing anything that you know other people did, and we were successful that year, and at the end of the season they arranged a pre-season tournament in Germany, and I was asked to go, and as I said, I went, and when I got to know that I was picked and they were going, and they said, oh, we'll be flying over there, I just thought, flying? I'm 16, 17 years of age, and the farthest I'd been were Blackpool or Cleethorpes or wherever, and here I am, you know, sitting when we got to airport, and I'm sitting in the airport, and I just, just couldn't take it all in, and that was an amazing feeling. And we actually won the tournament, came back. I played another 2 years at Sheffield Wednesday, and then Sheffield Wednesday's manager moved to Everton, and the assistant manager, Maurice Lindley, he went to Leeds. Leeds were in the second division then at that time. And he got in touch with me, and he said, are you still interested in signing professional, And I said, yeah, but I said, I'd like to obviously, because he said, because if you want, he says, Mr. Reevy, that was Don Reevy, he said, we'd like to have a chat with you, and I said, well, I'll speak to my parents first, I says, but yeah, we'll arrange a date for you to come. Anyway, we did, and my mum and dad said, well, look, you've got 3 years behind you with your woodworking thing, and they said, we'll leave it up to you. And I said, well, I'd love to give it a go. I don't think I'd ever, regret, not accepting it, so I did. And I stayed there for a year, and I didn't make the first team. I made the reserves, but it was obvious that I weren't going to, in their opinion, be good enough to play at the higher level, which, is really, why I came to be playing part-time. Because during the close season, I had a phone from Cheltenham Town in the Southern League, which is equivalent really to the non-league National League today. They used to have very good attendances. Hereford were part of them, of course, and the Southern League were a great standard. It had all ex-league players in it, and so I went down, had a look at the place, and got off the train at Cheltenham, and he met me in a taxi, and he said, well, just have a little drive round Cheltenham. Don't forget that I come from a little mining village and I started, he took me down a promenade, and he took me to all the parks and gardens that were there, and I said, yeah, I'll sign. And I did sign, and we'd spoke about it before, me and Annie, and when I did decide to go down, me and Annie were engaged at that time, and we said, well, we don't want to be living apart, shall we get married and then you come down with me? And that's what we did. And I had 4 or 5 good seasons at Cheltenham, and then there were the reason that I left Cheltenham, it was because that year we played Watford in the FA Cup, and I think it was the second round that we got, and we had a home game. And in our contracts, it said that if we got to the first round proper, we would get at the end of the season a bonus for it, Well, we got, I think it was the first or second round, and come end of season, we were all waiting for the retain list to go up, and all we got, every one of us, was a letter to say that unfortunately the club couldn't afford to pay for the bonuses. We'd have to forfeit it, which meant that every one of us were on a free transfer. We'd been sort of, well, they'd left it open that they'd broken their contract, And I thought, okay, fair enough, I'm sure they'll come back, because I'd been voted player of the year and I'd had a good season, so I had no reason not to think that they would sign me again. And within a few days of knowing that, a scout came from Newport County, in the 4th division then, and he said, would you be prepared to go and have a chat with Bobby Ferguson, manager at Newport? Eventually he went to Ipswich to play for Bobby Robson, their chief coach he was, and I had a bit of a trial with them, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'd like you to sign." So I said, "Well, look, I'll go home. I'll speak it with my wife." It means a big cut in wages, you know, because I were earning two wages, one playing football, which weren't very much. I think my contract at Cheltenham were £12 in the first team and £6 in the second team, like, you know. And yeah, I said, we'll go, we'll give it a go. And I had a good season, first season, enjoyed playing league football. It was a step up. Again, reliving a dream to play in the league, and then the second year we were really living on our savings, and it was apparent halfway through that you know we couldn't sustain ourselves. You know, we'd bought a house and had a mortgage and that, and I said to him mid-season, I said, look, I said, you know, I'm afraid that, you know, at the end of the season I'm going to have to go back to doing what I did before, because we really miss the other wage. And they said, well, look, we'll give you a rise if you, and it were about £5. I think I were on £25 that were full-time wage, and I'd dropped, you know, quite a lot in wages, like, and over the months, and I said, no, I said the travelling is getting too much. I said every day it was Newport to Cheltenham, which were quite a journey then because they didn't have the bridge, and I was getting really tired and drained and that, and I said, no, I've got to stop this. And that's what happened at the end of the season. I said, you know, right, you know, I'd like to terminate my contract, and they offered me a new deal, but it were only an extra £5, which was no way near what I could afford to live on. And that's how I come to be available. And I didn't know until years later, and this is years later, that Hereford had to pay Newport a fee for me, because I wasn't technically, you know, my contract went till something like July, and they came for me in sort of beginning of July, something like that. And I didn't know that a deal had been done. I thought I were a free agent, and you know, and at one point I said to Annie, when we weren't getting any offers in, that you know, maybe I'll have to, you know, sort of look for something else. And anyway, John Charles come, and my wife Annie, bless her, he came that day with Mako, that's Mike McLaughlin, and he said, knocked on the door, and we opened the door, and there's big Charlo there, massive guy, absolutely tremendous guy he was. He was really, really one of my idols when I was a young player. And he said, how are you doing, Ronnie? I said, and suddenly Annie appeared behind me, and I said, come in, like, come in. And Annie said, bless her heart, you know, with a sense of humour, she says, you're that big bloke who used to kick our players up in the air, didn't you? And he says, what did she just say? He says, does she realise I've come to try and sign Ronnie? And of course he had a laugh and a joke with it. So as he got to know Annie, like, that's how she was, like, you know. And that's how it started. And the first game I played, it were a game against Shrewsbury, and it were a friendly first game at season. It's 1971, and I remember Charlo. One of the problems he had was he wasn't a proper coach. He was more of a front man than anything. And he was playing that day. He was still a player manager, and we're in the dressing room half an hour before, and about 20 minutes before the game started, no sign of Charlo. This is what the usual thing was. Anyway, he came in, quickly got changed, 5-3. We're going out, and nobody knew where they were going to, what positions they were going to play. And we walked out onto the pitch, and we had a little bit of a warm up. And I said to John, I said, John, where do you want me to play? You know, and he said, well, you're a midfield player, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah. He says, well, just play midfield. He didn't say right side, left side, centre. Yeah. So I said, oh, okay. So I started off in the centre. Kicks the ball off. We had kick-off. He rolls the ball back to me. And this centre forward of theirs, he was a real hard case, he was. And he came steaming through. And I tore some ligaments in my knee. Within 15 seconds, I was out off the pitch, like, you know, and that was my debut for Hereford United, like, you know. And I think I was off about four weeks or something like that before I actually got my first league game, like. But, oh, yeah, it was a tremendous time. And, you know, and then the rest for me is history, really, is, you know, I could never have dreamed what lay ahead. We went to Roker Park, which was then Sunderland's ground, and they were a top first division team. And that was another wonderful experience, because here I am playing in Roker Park, you know, Sunderland against Sunderland, and I've got all my scrapbooks of all their players and the famous Roker Park's cross signs on the stadium. And again, another wonderful moment for me, because, you know, I kept thinking, like it's been at Hereford, what's going to happen next? What's going to come along next? And I don't know. I've been blessed with something. I don't know, but you know, it's just been, you know, a wonderful, wonderful time for me in my football career. Yeah, yeah.
So tell us then a bit about the build up to this famous FA Cup game. Just
yeah, it
was all of the cancellations and the
that's right.
One at Newcastle. Can you just kind of give us a little timeline of that?
That's
for people like us who don't really know it,
no
the timeline.
No,
just kind of, you know, how it all went.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, we played Cheltenham in the first round, and we had a comfortable win, 3-0, and I think the crowd were about 6,000 or 7,000 then, and then we played Kings Lynn, and we were drawn away, and it was a tough place to go at Kings Lynn, and we expected a tough game, and it got to the right to the end, and you know, we thought we'd lost it, because, you know, their centre forward, he got up and got a great header in, and somehow Fred Potter just pushed it round the post, and then the referee blew the whistle, which meant that we had a replay. And of course the replay then was at Edgar Street, and we then started having bigger crowds then, and we won that 1-0. Tough game. And then we knew then that we were going to play Northampton, and they were in obviously a league team. And you know, by that time, Colin had come, Colin Addison and he was then a first division player playing for Sheffield United. And Colin came with great coaching abilities, and he sort of started gelling the team as it became. You know, the players were already there. It just wanted somebody to organise them, and Colin was just the man for it, because such an imposing guy as a player on the pitch, very vocal, you know, and you just felt that you had to lift your game to try and match his, you know, and that's when it really all started. We played Northampton. It was a 0-0 draw. Again, a good crowd. The crowds were starting to creep up. We went to Northampton and we drew 2-2 and extra time, and still, you know, which meant that there were a third game, and that were at West Brom. It was to be played at West Brom, and I think most of I think that were a crowd of 8,000, and I think 6,000 of them were Hereford supporters. And the noise that they made that night was incredible. Like, and Northampton actually scored, you know, early on, but you know, we kept playing away, and we gradually got, you know, to do everything but score. And it got to the very last minute of the game, and Ken Mallender, bless him, our left back. I played against Ken when I was at Sheffield. He played for Sheffield United, and he managed to score a late goal for us, which again took us into extra time. And then Dudley, who was really the most exciting player in our team. He was a guy who you wanted to get ball all the time. Tremendous skill, great pace. It had you know, a great, you know, it was such a good player to have in your team, and he just got on the end of a late winner for us at Northampton, and believe it or not, then we already knew that the winner would be playing Newcastle at Newcastle, so a great incentive. And of course that meant that the euphoria around Hereford, I should imagine, you know, was just, you know, expectations. You know, I can imagine that the community were all, it's what the FA Cup is all about. Yes, and you know, we got through to the next round, and the next round we knew that we were going to play in Newcastle, which everybody were looking forward to very much. And I can imagine, you know, what it was like for the Hereford supporters, because once in a lifetime sort of opportunity, and we were under no pressure really, because we'd all got jobs. You know, we didn't have any worries with regards to that, because we'd all got as own living to make, and which being part-time helped really, because you know, it can be a lonely time being a professional footballer, because you do have a lot of time to think about things. Anyway, we went to Newcastle, and we stayed at Gosforth Park, and lovely hotel, and unfortunately the game got cancelled because the pitch wasn't, you know, ready for it, and they'd had a lot of rainfall up there, and a lot of our fans had travelled up, and anyway, it got rearranged, and so we had to go through it all again. And when we got there, the Geordies were absolutely fantastic. I mean, outside the ground, when we got off the bus and to the ground, and you know, they were all sort of, you know, round us, and you know, congratulating us that we got that far, and which is unbelievable for the away supporters. And we were absolutely high for it. We were ready for it, and we had this self-belief that we'd started to grow into. Didn't fear anybody, because you know, we felt so organised for, and getting this far were great, getting this far. Anyway, we kick off, and there's a lot of crowds still haven't got in ground. And within 15-16 seconds, Brian Owen, God bless him, he was on the corner of the 18-yard box. We kicked off, and he got this ball, and I was running round the back of him to say, hold it, hold it, hold it. And Brian, being Brian and a striker, he hit this ball, and honestly, you know, my goal keeps getting repeated, but his unfortunately wasn't caught on camera, but it flew straight across the goalkeeper, and it stuck in the top of the net. And the ground went silent for a few seconds, and then all of a sudden our lot, started up, and there was, as I said, there was still some coming into the ground. So some of them, a lot of people hadn't seen that, and the game went backwards and forwards, slow forwards, back, and Newcastle scored again. They got the equaliser. And then they got a little bit of a dubious penalty, which Malcolm MacDonald scored. That was 2-1. But we came straight back, and Colin hit a lovely, sweet goal, and 2-2. Went in at half-time, 2-2. Colin's there saying, look, we've got a great chance here. We keep doing what we're doing, and we've got a result here. And sure enough, we did. We carried on, and don't forget, a lot of people think that the mud was a great level at Edgar Street, but we were playing on a good surface, on a first division surface, and we played just as well as they did, because we got 7 ex-league players playing in our team. And it's about 10 minutes from the end, and Billy Meadows had a great header, and Ian McFall made a fantastic save, which could have made it 3-2, and we could have won that game. Anyhow, the whistle went, and here we are. We've got them back at Edgar Street. Edgar Street, the famous Edgar Street pitch. The slope. How are these going to cope on our slope, like? And yeah, it set it up. It set everything up for expectations, having gone and played well there. I remember Frank Miles once saying that, they were in the director's room afterwards, and the chief constable, he came into the boardroom, and he said, he said, Frank, he said, this is at Newcastle. He says, you wouldn't have known today who were the first division team. He says, your team played exceptionally well, didn't they? And he said, yeah, he says, and that's what we're trying to build, like, Anyhow, going back to Edgar Street, as you know, it got cancelled 3 times, I think, 2 or 3 times. And unfortunately for Newcastle, they stayed in Worcester. And for them, it must have been, really sort of depressing, really, because it was winter. There were no facilities like there are for training or out like that, and they were getting a little bit sort of, must have been getting a bit anxious because the pitch was heavy. Anyway, when it came to the day that they said, the game's on, then that's when the dream starts to materialize, and the crowd, unbelievable. I mean, the atmosphere, the energy, the things that people would probably never experience in their lifetime. A little club got a big club with a great chance of causing an upset. We honestly believe that after we'd played so well at Newcastle. We'd had nothing to worry about because, as I said, we were at work right up until the day we played the game, And I remember that we walked from the Green Dragon to the ground, and you could feel the vibes, you could feel, what was waiting for you. And that were amazing as well. And then the game itself, well, it were made for television. It were made for television, that game, and especially when it turned out the result what it turned out to be. And of course, that's when we were introduced to Motti, John Watson, and he's been what we call our 13th man ever since, because he loves the place, and to this day he's part of it. Like, he's part of the family. Yeah.
You know, you said you walked from the Green Dragon to to the ground. Were people kind of lining the streets, or were they all
empty?
Tell us about that then.
Yeah, it was you know, funny really, because I suppose from the Hereford people, like, you know, the Saturday is a you know, sort of a busy day, isn't it? And we got there, and there were people, you know, shouting and saying, "Good luck, guys," and as we were getting nearer and nearer to the ground, you could hear the crowd, and they were already singing, and that was absolutely amazing. And you know, everybody were sort of in their own thoughts, going to the ground. And when we got to the ground, it took some getting in, but we got in, and yeah, it was an amazing time. Yeah. It couldn't have been a better build-up, really, for us. Yeah.
What songs were they singing? Can you remember?
Oh, Hereford United, Hereford United, we all love you, and we'll always support you. Yeah, and that great. Yeah, such a noise as well. I don't know how they got all people in really, but yeah, amazing crowd, and that's been the strength of Hereford football clubs, though, is the fact that they've always had this wonderful support. You know, Hereford love their football clubs, and they've shown it by the way they've attended, and you've seen the attendances this year and the last 3 years, the new club, and the support is still there. And I think they're used to having a little bit of success, and yeah, it's been made a huge impact on our life as well. Yeah.
So tell us about walking out onto that pitch then and the game.
Walking out, I think every one of us had a smile on his face, believe it or not. And obviously, having just recently played, you know, at Newcastle, and virtually the same team, just we were so fired up. You know, they didn't need no. Colin's team talk that day, well, Malcolm MacDonald had said that in a paper interview that he says, "I think I might score the most goals that's ever been scored in a cup game." He was like that, Malcolm. You know, off the cuff, I think he was a nice guy, like, you know, but he was building the hype up, I think, and he said, "I'm going to score 10. And so Colin got this article out of the paper and he put it on the wall, and he said, "There's the motivation, guys," you know, and that was it. You know, we all knew what we got to do. We being so close to the replay, you know, we know how we got to play. We know how to play on our pitch, and we knew it was going to be hard for them. And we honestly were full of confidence that day. Yeah, so we were well prepared. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the match then, what happened?
Yeah, the match started off, you know, unfortunately it started off badly for Roger Griffiths, because in the very first 2 minutes, Newcastle were in our goal mouth, and a loose ball, and Malcolm MacDonald, Fred Potter and Griff all met at the same time. Griff went over the top, and Roger Griffiths being Roger Griffiths, he was possibly one of the fittest guys in the club. He just shook it off, and you could see, if you look at the footage when he does get up, how badly he is limping. But he played for 82 minutes like that. And that is the epitome, really, of what the team were. You know, they give their all. And nobody knew until he came off that he'd actually fractured his leg, and played for 82 minutes. And it was end-to-end stuff. It was just so equal. I mean, Newcastle could have been 2 up in the first quarter of an hour. And it's a famous saying, if you don't take your chances, you know, you bear the consequences. And as it turned out, it did. And second half, we were kicking downhill, and I think it's fair to say that we had most of the game. They had a couple of chances where they could have turned it round, but and so did we. Ken Malinder hit the post, you know, and it were all Dudley again. You know, he ran Frank Clark ragged that day, and this is a guy who's been playing league football. You know, I think they had 7 internationals or 8 internationals in their team, and I think we matched them 1 for 1, and they could see that we were never going to give in. They'd already had 1 game against us like that, and kicking downhill the second half of the extra time. You know, we just felt that the goal, when it came, the goal that levelled it, I think it were 86 minutes. When they scored their goal, you can, if you watch the game, you can see the relief on their face, because Motti said in his commentary, "That's it." He just says, "That's it," you know, meaning 5 minutes to go, that's it. You know, and there's a big pause in his commentary, and then he carries on again. But it's just the word he said, "That's it." And that's how probably the ground and the crowd felt at that moment in time. But as we know, it didn't happen. I mean, I didn't. When people ask me about the goal, I just say that I did. All I did was I just saw what were in front of me, which were Brian Owen. I played a little 1-2 with him, and all I were left we were just having a crack at goals. And I didn't intend it to go where it went. All I had in my head was this square post that I wanted to try and keep it that low. You know, and all these happen in split seconds. You know, it's just one of them things that happens, and it just popped up as I got to it, and it just made it like hitting a volleyball, and it just flew, and it must have been halfway there because I were off. I knew that the goalkeeper wasn't going to get it, and I was off. I were already doing my run, and then this magical thing about the crowd, and I watch it to this day, and he plays it nearly every day, this part of it where the kids are running onto pitch, and the people in the last 46 years, every time I see somebody, they'll say, "If you look at this part of the film that it shows you, this is me," or "This is where my uncle was standing," or "This is where my dad and my granddad were standing," and they all remember it as though it was yesterday. And yeah, and of course we get extra time, and Ricky, bless him, worst thing you can have in football is being substitute, you know, on a big day like this. And he'd been substitute through all the cup games, and it was fitting that this lad come on and scored the winner, and we were all delighted for him, bless him, because it was his moment, and you know, sitting on that bench all that time, you know, and he thought he only had about 8 minutes to do something, and he certainly did. And it couldn't have happened to, you know, a guy who'd deserved to be on pitch. It would have got in anybody's other non-league team. It was just that, you know, could only select 11 at one time, and he came on and he had his moment, yeah, like I did. And the times that we've had together since with Motti, the things that we've been involved in, you know, all came from that day and that run and that season, really. And as we know, looking back, Hereford went from strength to strength and eventually got into League Division 2, didn't they? So yeah, it was a wonderful day and a wonderful start to another part of Hereford's history. Yeah. Yeah, and then when Ricky scored his goal, all the kids came back on the field, and even the police were running on the field again, and you know, they did an amazing job, really, because, you know, in them days, you know, it was accepted that you could go on the pitch, and you didn't need that many police. But we've spoken to some of the police, you know, since that day, and you can see some of them jumping up and down as they're running onto the field, like, you know. But Motti summed it up when he said, you know, it was a great thing that probably would never happen again, and the crowds were absolutely beautiful, and the kids just being kids, they were amazing. And we still look today at some of the faces and try and look at somebody different, and yeah, it's they made it, didn't they? That was their part. Yeah.
So what happened then when the final whistle blew?
Final whistle went. Well, I actually were near the changing rooms, and I'm only recalling what I remember seeing on the film. I think Dudley and Tony Goff were the last to come off, because they were right in the far corner when whistle sounded, and they just got mobbed, like. And so yeah, as I said, I was near the dressing rooms, and I just, you know, that were end at game, and off I went. And yeah, it was good to see it on telly afterwards, though, with the kids, and then them all standing in front of the stand, and yeah, amazing.
So what was the atmosphere like in the dressing room?
The dressing room was just crazy, really, and yeah, we were all singing and dancing, and like you see some of them today, and yeah, jokes and everything. And then the chairman came in, and you know, he'd put so much into the club, had Frank Miles, and trying so desperately hard to get us into the Football League. And you know, we were really pleased for him, because he was really the one that got everybody together with Frank. Very ambitious, and eventually, as you know, we did get in the league that year, and I think the cup run actually helped us enormously to help his cause. And you know, that was great when it happened. Yeah, it changed football, really. Changed the way people, you know, clubs viewed promotion and relegation. You know, usually the non-league club missed out. They'd re-elect the ones that were in. And you know, Frank's dream was a little bit nearer, and God bless him. Yeah.
So what happened? Did you all go out and celebrate that night?
Well, what we did, Annie and the wives had a little room to themselves, and we, it being a long day for football wives, I mean, we used to set off from Cheltenham for a home game, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, and the game was finished, and we got out of the you know, we got ready and changed, and it'd probably be about 5:30. And I used to stand and, you know, sign autographs and whatever. But at the time, the social club were on the other side of the thing, and you know, a lot of the lads used to go across. But it was a long day for my wife and kids, and wherever I played, they always came first. And so we went quite early away from the ground. Took us a while to get to the car, but yeah, we got there. And on the way back, we got some fish and chips, and some friends of ours rang us up, as the phone never stopped ringing that night. But the first phone call we had when we got back in the house was, you know, our best friends said, you know, can we come up and watch it on telly? And they said yeah, and that was amazing, because I'd never seen myself on a camera or a film, and we were all saying to things, oh, look at that, and it's like when you first hear yourself talk and you've got a Yorkshire accent, you think, do I talk like that? Or And I remember thinking, do I run like that? Is that how I look? And great experience, because never seen it before. Of course, they made it the main match of the day, and you know, we had about 20-25 minutes of sitting there and going through it all, and never forget that, never.
At what moment did you realise that goal would be so
I didn't.
historic?
Honestly didn't. It was just another goal in another cup game, and in them days you used to think about the next match, and that's honestly how I felt. I could not have thought that what happened after that is what did happen. You know, you see goals like that every week from different games. It just happened that at the time the FA Cup were going through a little bit of a rough period. It was the first time that they'd ever made a non-league club the main match. It was a great opportunity for people to realise had a feel of what the FA Cup was, because they couldn't have set it up better with this hysteria, the massive crowd that were there, the shots that they got with camera of people sat in trees and that, and you know, I'm sure that, you know, somebody who doesn't really, you know, watch football, they saw a different type of, you know, thing that were on the screen, where it went right into the core of what the supporters were like, what you know, the go to the lengths of standing in trees and that, and I think the television caught the atmosphere, and I think that set the ball rolling for the BBC to think, aye, we could make this happen every year. And I think that's how it come about, that they started, you know, to televise non-league teams in the FA Cup more. And today we see, you know, right from day one, they're filming it, and yeah, I think it was the start of that period that we were part of, like, and yeah. I think the legacy from Hereford is one that, you know, we know after that game that first division clubs and the higher clubs didn't like playing the FA Cup against such a low team. It still happens today, and that really proved that it had been done before. You know, I mean, years and years ago, Yeovil had done it, and Bedford, I think, had done it, a giant killing thing. But this really, television opened it up, and you know, I think that you know, we just started everything off, really. Yeah. Yes, I think it gave them belief that then that season that we got there were a great chance that we would get promotion, and I think the fact that you know, Hereford were well supported, you know, and you know, it gave them, you know, the chance to expand. I think you know, it certainly has gone down in Hereford's history, and for those that were there, you know, Hereford has its own history, and the football club has their part in the history of the Hereford people, and people then around the world, when people say Hereford, they know that they've been famous once. I can remember I was talking to a guy a businessman. He went to Japan on business, and he met this guy who we were going to do a deal with, and he asked him where he come from, and he said Hereford, and he said, he said, Hereford, giant killers. He said, Ronnie Radford, and to this day, you know, I haven't seen him since, but he says that is actually true. He said it went worldwide, and, you know, Hereford was suddenly on the map. A lot of people didn't know where Hereford was, you know, and I think that sort of helped Hereford, you know, to become, you know, a more known, and, you know, it did, I think it did, in my opinion, any road, it did a lot for Hereford to be recognised as, you know, a place of prominence, really, and part of history that were hidden before in sport and that. Yeah.
And what about you and your family and Annie? What's been the personal legacy of the?
Oh, the personal legacy, that is incredible. I mean, the things that me and Annie have done since, the people at Hereford, every time we come down, it's like coming home. It's just like, you know, they welcome us with such love and such passion. We meet new people every time. We see people that we've known from day one, you know. My family, you know, the things that they have to I have always kept it sort of, I've never sort of been a person who said, you know, I am Ronnie. When we've met somebody, I'm Ronnie Radford. I just say my name's Ron or Ronnie. And I've even worked on sites where they've never known that I were involved in football, you know, and until somebody one day have said something. And but our legacy is the fact that we keep coming back year after year after year after year, 46 years later, and we're still doing, you know, something that is so deep entrenched in here, in the heart. And it's just, we go, Annie and I will be going home tomorrow and we'll be thinking, what can happen next? You know, and the things that we've been involved in is amazing. I mean, from that 1 second, from that one game, I mean, you know, it's just for the club, for me personally, for my family. It's just been an amazing experience, and it's been an amazing journey. It's been a journey that at first we found it difficult to separate ourselves from being Ron Radford to being Hereford United, to be asked to represent Hereford United on so many wonderful occasions, and I tell you, the things that me and Annie has experienced is just, you know, absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, very emotional time when we come to Hereford for both of us. We always go back feeling on a high. That's how we are. We're on a high when we come down here. We are on a high when we go back home, and we share it with our family. And I just look at it that you know, I've been able to take my 2 grandchildren to Wembley, which I'd never ever dreamed of. They've been down with me to Wembley to experience what, you know, I've experienced, and my sons have been down. We've been to John Motson's This Is Your Life. We've picked the famous balls out of the glass jar. It goes on and on and on. Nobody could have dreamed of that, could they? Nobody. But the main thing is, and the most important thing is the people that we've met along that journey. And that, to me, and Annie is the most important thing. Not the goal, not what we've done, but from the wonderful friendships that's, you know, we've got from that particular thing happening to us, and that is really deeply entrenched in our hearts. That is, because it's part of our life, a big part of our life, and we want to hang on to that, you know, and it's something we treasure.
Can you just tell us a little bit about the recent time of Hereford going to Wembley for the Vase Cup final, and you said about experiencing it from the fans' side and how you got excited when they scored the goal.
What an experience that was. We'd been to Wembley the day before. We'd presented the Giant Killers Cup, and we booked an hotel to stay overnight for Hereford's game on Sunday. And we could see the ground from where we were staying at our hotel, and we got a taxi and we drove up, and they got as far as Wembley Way, and then they couldn't, we had to get out there. And when we got out of the car, we looked up at the stadium, and all we could see was this mass of white shirts just going right round what we could see of the gallery upstairs at Wembley. And as we got nearer, we heard the sound, and the nearer we got, the louder it got, and we went up these steps and started making our way to the where we were going to go in, because we were sitting with the crowd. We wanted to experience that, and as we were going along, you know, somebody said, "Oh, I think that's Ronnie Radford there," and that's funny, really, because we were there standing for the next 20 minutes, you know, meeting Hereford people and signing autographs and that, and then when we got into the ground and we were sat with Joyce and Melvin Powell, Hereford supporters and their family, right in the middle of everybody, and it was that moment that we could sense what it was like being part of the crowd, because, you know, we'd only seen it from a player's point of view, but the atmosphere was unbelievable at Wembley. All one end were covered with white shirts, 20,000 people, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 more than what we had, and it was an amazing experience. And I said to Annie, I says, must have been what it was like on that day that we played, and them games that we played, and we were so wrapped up in it. And I remember the first goal when it went in. Hereford scored early on, first 2 or 3 minutes, and I think me and several others went down 3 or 4 steps with those hands in the air and shouting and jumping, and what a wonderful moment. And there we were, experiencing it from a fan's point of view rather than a playing point of view, and unfortunately they didn't get the result that they wished for, but that, I don't think, took a lot away from the fans. Were disappointed, but I'm sure that they will never forget their day at Wembley, because I never would forget that, like I don't forget our time. But that for me were and Annie especially, you know, were great. You know, it was such a marvellous experience, knowing what it was like to be a fan, a true fan, and being wrapped up in it and being part of it. Yeah.
From the top, tell us what's happened with the team then.
Yeah. Well, we keep in touch with each other, either by phone or Christmas cards. Every year we send everybody, all the players and the wives and the families, Christmas cards, exchange them. Through the year we keep in touch by phone, we talk, and the reunions we've had, they've always been marvellous nights, because everybody's been there with their wives, and it was though, you know, they were a team on their own, wives, because they all got on. They were all, you know, excited about, you know, just as we were as players, and you know, always a lot of emotion when we see each other. And fortunately, this weekend we're going to experience that again, and that'll be lovely. That to see all of them and catch up on old times. After that, after us getting into the league, I think I were about 29 at the time, and we played the next year in the Football League, and then I stayed another year and played in the then third division. But at that time, they were all going full time. The year before, they'd decided to go a full-time club, which I didn't want again, obviously, for obvious reasons, as I said to you before. And you know, so I elected to stay part-time. But luckily for me, they must have thought that I had something to contribute, because I did hold my spot down, you know, in the first team, and played for another 2 years. But at the end of the second year that we were in the league, and I were playing in the third division, I got a little bit of an Achilles tendon injury, and that slowed me down a bit. And they said to me, you know, well, look, we want to be all full-time now, you know, we're offering you a chance to come full-time again, but we understand, like, you know, that what your circumstances are, and I were doing well in my business, and so I said to him, you know, right, that's fine. And towards the end of that season, I think it were about 2 months before, Worcester City made me an offer to go as their full-time manager and coach. And I'd taken some coaching, you know, I got my badge on coaching football, the first part of it, and I thought, yeah, that really does sound good. Having a go at that, I love coaching, and you know, I'd like to pass on what I've learnt to other people. But what I didn't realise is the politics that's involved, and the other side of football that managers experience and have to overcome. And we started off well. We started off well. I think we were second in the league, and we'd got you know, 2-3 months into the game, and then I was left with a situation which, for me, as a manager, player manager, was unacceptable. What the club proposed to do, and I realised then that being a manager wasn't for me. If that was part of the role that I was to carry on being, I was quite comfortable with the coaching, and you know, enjoying that. But having seen what circumstances managers are put in and have to make decisions, I just thought that on principle that's not who I am. And so that's when I said to him, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to hand in my resignation. I realise that that football management isn't going to be for me. They asked me to keep my reasons private, which I did. I've never told anybody about what happened, and then I just got an offer from Bath City, and it was the best contract I'd ever had, Bath City, and I'd still was struggling with my Achilles tendon, and I'd played about 7, 8, 9 games, and I tore a hamstring in the back, I'm 32 then, and I thought this is the time to retire, because I couldn't afford the time off because I was self-employed as a joiner. And I think we're all on a road in our life, and things happen to change that road. And I thought it was the time for me to say, right, you know, what you've had in football is enough for, you know, to last me a lifetime. And this was the time to go down another route and just concentrate then on what I was doing for a living. And Annie was fully behind us, and as she always has been. And yeah, that's how I come to finish playing. Yeah.
Well done, Joy.